We'll go ahead and get started. It's kind of hard to stand in here and code when it's so nice outside, isn't it? Well, you signed up for this. That's what it means to be a programmer. Everybody's outside enjoying the weather, and you're sitting in a dark room staring at a computer. Get used to it. Just kidding, we go outside too. All right, so today we're gonna continue on with the sort of the idea of things that we discussed on Monday, this idea of using an object relational mapping to coordinate a database with our Python application. Today specifically though, we're focused on users, logging in and logging out, tracking user information. So you had an assignment, user sign up, which you all loved, and you know that did some of the stuff that we're going to see today in terms of registration and doing some kinds of error tracking, validation kinds of things. So we're going to add those into our flick list application. Just like we saw on Monday, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're adding into our flick list application is very similar to what you saw in the prep work videos, but honestly, I think that repetition is good when you're first picking up new concepts. It doesn't always stick the first time around. So, you know, if you're kind of rolling your eyes at me like, oh, you're just going to do the prep work videos again, well, some, yes, but I think it's good for you. So, and there will be a few wrinkles along the way that we have to address as well. So let's start with some just general review questions like we usually do, and then we'll hop into flick lists. First off, what is a session? What does that even mean? We've actually seen session pop up a couple times before, but we kind of gave a more formal definition to it this week. What is a session? What is that? It's a connection. So if I log into any website, really, like Facebook, right? As long as I'm logged into that website and doing stuff, interacting with that website, that all happens in the case of one session. So in other words, we would say that a session consists of many requests that I make to the server and that the server responds to. So a request is a one-time event. It's I want a page. The server tries to give me that page, right? A session consists of many of those requests back and forth between me and the server. That's what a session is for. They're useful. I mean, they can remember stuff about me, remember that I am who I say I am, and other information that I tell it. We'll see these actually come more into play, I think, on Monday as well, when we start talking about cookies. What's a secret key? I know we didn't go into a whole lot of detail on it. I think we're going to go into more detail about secret key next week as well, but what do we need it for? Anybody have an idea? Where did it come into play? In the back? It identifies our session. It's used to help with encryption, which we have not really talked about that much at all. You could probably sort of discern that by the fact that we call it a secret key. You know, we feel very sneaky passing these secret keys around. But it's ways to identify sessions with users. It's ways to safely send information back and forth between our users. All right. How do we create a function that runs for every single request? So this differs from how we are used to doing things, right? Normally I would create a function that's geared towards a very specific kind of request. What's that function called? It's geared towards a specific kind of request? A handler, exactly. So we've been writing lots of handlers, and we've gotten pretty good at doing that, I hope. But sometimes I might want to write a more general purpose function, a function that's going to run more often for every single request even. So how do I do that? What do I need to do? Before request. So there was the little thing in the code, we'll see this when we do the walkthrough as well, @app.before request. What's that called? Does anybody remember what those things are called? Decorators. They're called decorators. Yep. And then what is an endpoint? We've actually been using endpoints. We've seen endpoints before, but I heard it come up in the prep work videos, and I don't know that we've actually specifically talked about them that much. What is an endpoint referring to? What is that? What am I actually saying when I say I'm trying to access an endpoint? What is that? I'm sorry? It's a specific, it could be a web page, it's a specific location that I'm trying to access. So a handler, every handler has an endpoint associated with it. What page is that handler operating on? That's its endpoint. We haven't had a huge reason to talk about endpoints because as of right now, there's one handler for every endpoint, or maybe two handlers for every endpoint. But when we start doing things like this, where I have functions that run for many, many, many requests, I may want to filter which endpoints they're operating on and which ones they aren't. We saw that in the video. If you're not careful about it, you can get fun things like redirect loops that go forever and ever and ever. What is message flashing? We've seen this all the time, right? What's an example of message flashing that you've seen when you're browsing around? Anybody have any ideas?
Invalid login.
Invalid login. So, I mean, how does this differ from just displaying information to a user? I mean, that's what it's doing, right? It's displaying information to a user, but how is this different from just the regular old template structure that we've been doing? What's the difference?
It's based on your interaction. It's based on what it may not come up.
Yeah, so it's temporary, right? It's a one-time deal based on, we use it a lot for error conditions in the prep work today. That's what you'll often see them used for. It doesn't have to be used for that purpose. It can be used for whatever purpose you'd like, but very commonly used for tracking errors if you do something incorrect. Pop a little message up on the screen telling you what you did wrong. We'll see some examples of that as well. And then last, but certainly not least, I believe the last video that you looked at today actually had a relationship between two models. So you're building a task application, task tracking application, where users could set up their own tasks. How did I make that relationship between the user and the tasks that they created? What did that look like? How did I indicate that in my model? What did I see? db.relationship, so there's some indication that there's a relationship between this object and the other object. I also start to see that an additional property gets added to my model, right? That indicates, this is the user that owns this particular task. In a database, how would that show up? A join is the operation we would be performing, and in the table itself, I would see a foreign key. Yeah, a foreign key. That's the process that we're mimicking on the Python side when we make these relationships using that db.relationship. We're actually not going to do that today in the walkthrough. That's not on our agenda, but it definitely is on our agenda at some point. We will get to it. Just didn't make the cut today. Are there any questions about concepts from the prep work before we hop into today's walkthrough? Any questions? All right, so let's switch over to flick list stuff. We're gonna do, yeah.
Sorry. In the third video, you referred to something called an object session. Is that the same thing as the secret key, or is that?
So there is a session object, right? He used that session object. We're going to use that session object as well today in the walkthrough. It's not the same thing as a secret key. The secret key is actually separate, but they both operate with one another. The secret key is necessary to use that session object. If you don't use it, he showed this in the video, you get a little error that says, I don't know what your secret key is. Basically, it's trying to protect you. It's trying to protect the information that's sent back and forth. If you don't provide it with a way to do that, it doesn't know how to proceed. We'll talk about that in more detail when we get to things like encryption and cookies, which is coming up in the next, I think it might be next week. Now, we've actually seen sessions before, right? Actually, this is potentially confusing. We have the session object, which in the prep work in this we use to track whether or not a user is currently logged in, right? But we've seen session somewhere else. Where else do we see session? With the database.session. Are those the same thing? Are we talking about the same thing? No, they're two distinctly separate things. However, the concept is really the same. The concept is really quite the same. I, as a user, use a session to communicate with the website, and then my website uses a session to communicate with the database. the concept of what a session is really the same in both scenarios. It's an open line of communication between two parties to send information back and forth, multiple requests back and forth. So I understand that might be a little confusing. You see the word session pop up. Which one am I talking about? You have to use context, use surrounding information to figure out which session we're actually talking about. They do behave differently. We've used them differently. We'll see that today as well. But the concept of what a session is actually the same. Any other questions? Yeah, over there.
With this session then, is there like an adjective I can use in my brain to differentiate it? So there's like the database section, the DB that session, and then is there like, I don't want to just call it normal session.
Might be like a client session because it's coming from the client side, and so the code's running on the server, right? The session's maintaining communication between the client and the server. However, that becomes a little bit confusing because from the database perspective, our server is actually the client, right? Because that's the one making requests and doing information. So it is a little nebulous, I suppose. But you could do you could characterize one as a database session, and you always see the DB in front of that one, right? DB.session, that's your database session. If you don't see the DB out in front, then that's going to be the HTTP session, maybe the web session, something like that. Oh, Ryan, you can hear him from up here. Be quiet, Ryan. I don't know if you can hear me. I bet if we all said it, he would hear us. Maybe later. All right, what was I doing? I'm glad that's going to live on YouTube forever. All right. We're going to switch over to get set up with FlickList and try and implement the user functionality in FlickList. That's our goal for the walkthrough today. So I'm actually on the wrong branch. I'm on the studio branch because I was reviewing the studio before class today. You might be on a different branch. Regardless, make sure to do a git status. Make sure you see, whoops, I don't know what that is. No, I don't care. I don't care about that. That's not what matters to me. So check out the walkthrough 7 branch is the one that we want. There we go. And you can see that I'm already on my environment. I've already set up, I've already activated it, but here's your friendly reminder to activate your environment if you haven't done so already. And so we have a to-do list here. If I switch over, we have our to-do list. So as of right now, our application, we've come a long way, especially on Monday, we did a lot of work. We tied our application to a database, which is fantastic. It actually remembers stuff now instead of pretending to remember stuff, so that's good. But really, it doesn't have a concept of a user yet. So there's just one list of movies that everybody is sharing, and that would just not work. I can't even agree on what movies to watch with my wife at home. There's no way that hundreds of people are going to agree on what movies they should be watching and things like that. So that's a big piece of functionality that's missing. We need some concept of a user. So our goal today is to implement some of that functionality. We're going to set up a user model and a way to register and log out for our users, a way to remember whether or not we're logged in. We're going to do a little bit of message flashing, and then that's it, actually. That's what we're going to get to. So let's start at the top of the list and work our way down. First thing we need to do is create a user model to represent this user information. So let's go ahead and open up our code here. Now, we're not going to touch the relationship piece today. We could. We actually know enough. We saw it in the prep work video. But we're not going to touch the relationship piece right now. That'll come a bit later. We're just going to set up some basic user functionality to start us off. So we're going to go to main.py. And just as a little organizational note, I think it's a good idea to keep your models at the top of the file. Technically, they can go wherever the heck you want them to. The computer's not going to complain. But I'm a neat freak when it comes to code, and I think it's a nice thing to see models clearly defined all at the top of the file. Or actually later on, we might make separate files for our models even as well, keep things even more compartmentalized. But organization is certainly helpful. Excuse me, thank you. So we want to create another model to represent a user. So, I mean, we have this template here to kind of help us out, right? It's not going to look exactly the same as our movie model, but it's going to share some things in common. This is more review of last time around. When I type in db.model, what am I doing? Inheritance, good. So what properties do we expect this user model to have, I guess is the next question. If you watch the prep work, you probably have some good ideas for this. Although there's one property that's pretty much a given for any model that you create. ID is almost always going to be one of them. So we'll stick that in. And it'll look very similar to the ID that we see down below, because most IDs are, they serve functionally the same purpose. So we can set them up very much the same way. What other properties do we think this email? Yeah, so that's oftentimes what'll be used. Now, it doesn't have to be an email. Maybe you want to allow people to choose their own usernames. That could be included, or maybe you want both, a username and an email. It's not unusual either, right? But we'll use emails just as our login information. So what's a good data type for an email? String, it seems reasonable. I don't think I've ever seen an email address that's 120 characters long, but somebody out there probably has an obnoxiously long email address, so we'll be accommodating of them. The other thing that our user needs is password. So we'll stick a password field on here. Now this, we actually, there are limitations on passwords. Again, I don't think I've ever seen anybody with a password that is 120 characters long. However, they do say that longer passwords are more secure, right? It's just human memory that prevents us from making passwords that large. I don't want to go off on a security rant, but longer passwords are considered to be more safe. I'm sorry?
So two people can't have the same password.
Can two people have the same password? Is that a thing? Oh, I don't know why I put that on there. I wasn't thinking, sorry. My fault. My brain, I was moving my mouth and not using my brain. But is there any reason why you couldn't do that? I mean, no, the computer's not going to stop you, but man, your users are going to be really weirded out. That would be very strange. That would be a big security loophole, actually. If I try to receive a password and it tells me I can't, then I know somebody else is using it. Then I just have to figure out who that somebody else is. So that's a bad idea. Thank you. I did require emails to be unique. That's not a bad idea. That's a good idea, because oftentimes we just want to allow one account per, we say one account per user, but let's be honest, right? People have ways of making more accounts if they really want to. So it's really one account per email address. All right, so this is as good as a model as any. We need a couple of other pieces of information for our model though, like what? Constructor, yeah, constructor. So how do we create one of these things? We need to tell it the email and the password. I think we need to provide both of those. We cannot assume either of those pieces of information. That would be bad. So we do need to pass in an email address and a password to construct one of these. Oh, yep. I don't know what my brain is, really does not want to type in def for whatever reason. So we'll set the email and we'll set the password. Also, too, I mean, I guess I told you I wasn't going to go on a security rant, but I would it'll make me feel better to mention that treating passwords like this is like kind of whoa, for lack of a better word, I guess. We're just throwing around plain text passwords right now, which is a huge no-no. If that bothers you, good. It should bother you. If it doesn't bother you, well, come on, it should bother you. And we're gonna fix that eventually, but not today. We're gonna fix that. Just not right now. And then the last, but certainly not least thing that we could do, if you remember from Monday, we made this. What's this guy do again? It's a representation, a string representation. So, we can make something for our user as well, which maybe just prints out their email address. Now, you could print out the password as well, but come on, man. Maybe not the best idea to do that. Oh, I did. Thank you. Did I delete it, or did I just never type it in? Oh, I deleted it. Okay, cool. It doesn't matter. I don't know why I asked. But thank you. So, there's no reason not to make this similar. I'm borrowing directly from down below here. We'll just stick the email address in there so that we can distinguish these objects from one another. All right, cool. All good? So far, so good? Question? Stands for representation. It's usually a human readable representation. So the computer is keeping track of all this information, but it does it with ones and zeros and other stuff that's not easy for humans to understand. We are creating a representation of this object that is easy for humans to understand what we're talking about. I'll see the email address and know exactly which user I'm talking about. Whenever I print it out, whenever I display it, whenever I print it. It's a string. This is a string. So anytime that I print out a user object, it'll show up in this format. We actually saw that on Monday, I believe, with some movies. So if you're debugging, for example, I'm trying to manage logins or track a list of movies or whatever, and I stick print statements in my code, it'll show up in this format. If I don't have this in here, what's it gonna look like? I honestly don't know. I have no idea. It might be something I could use. It might be a bunch of gibberish that is, only intended for the computer. This explicitly says, I want this to look like this. I want this object to look like this. Yeah, what's up?
So sometimes you want to verify that an email actually is an email,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you would do like here or like later in your code?
Yeah, great question.
Adding it like to the database.
Where should verification of email addresses happen was the question. Does anybody have any insight on that? Where should we do that? As we register. So definitely as we register. Should we let the database do that for us? Can we let the database do that for us? The answer is actually yes. We could allow the database to do that for us, but then the question is, should we allow the database to do that for us? I think the answer to that is no. I don't think that we should, even though we probably could. A, it would take a lot more work to do it on the database side, I think, than to do it in Python. And B, that's not really what the database is for. The database is for putting information in, getting information back out. So it'll be more efficient and faster and just easier overall for us to do it on the Python side. Although do recall when we talked about validation that the more times you can validate something, the better in general. So trying to do it in multiple locations is not necessarily a bad way to go about it. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
The syntax on the return
Uh-huh.
formatting, the %R, does it have to be %R?
Yeah, %R indicates the type of the thing that's going to get substituted in here. And in this particular case, it's a string. So the R represents a string. This is a throwback to how C, this is like a C formatted string. If any of you have done C programming, I'm sorry, but you know what I'm talking about. This is how C did it back in the day, and so lots of other languages borrow that syntax. It's a little outdated. We actually saw different ways of doing this, like dot format, that are a bit more modern, but behave in a similar fashion. Which you are more than welcome to use as well. That'll get you to the same place. Something like this is perfectly acceptable. I got no problem with that. Okay, so I want to get all this stuff set up so that we can do, logins. Well, we need to do registrations, and then we can worry about logins and stuff like that. But before I do that, I need to make sure that my database is ready for these models, right? So right now, I don't have anything in my database for this model. Hasn't been put in there yet. So this is something we're gonna have to do from time to time. I'm actually gonna have to scrap my database and start over again so that I can make this users table. So I actually don't even have MAMP running, I don't think. Let me start that up first. So start this up, make sure that it's running. We did this on Monday as well a couple of times. I'll go back over to Git bash here and fire up a Python terminal. We need to import some things, right? From main import DB and user and movie. We want all of our models, since I'll be dropping and recreating all of our tables in our database. So I'm going to import all of those things. All right, that's our usual message that we see. And then we'll say, what is it? Is it drop all? Like that? So there goes all my tables, and then we'll do a db.create all, I think, is what we need. And hey, this time it's creating 2 tables because it recognizes the fact that we have 2 models. That's good, right? There's our user table and there's our movie table that have been created. And I'm not going to do this, but if you want to verify, you can always fire up PHP myadmin and go double check that they're actually in there. But I trust the computer. I believe that they're actually in there. I don't feel like I need to go double check. So we now have a table that we can use, manipulate, modify, however we need to. So let's.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I got a little behind. What's the command you do?
Create all, create underscore all. db.create underscore all. I mean, if you were able to do the drop all one, should be able to do this one. It might give you an error if the syntax, if you didn't save your code, or if your syntax is a little off on your objects, on your model, your persistence class, it might give you an error. There we go. That'll help see more stuff. So now that we have those tables, we can proceed on to the next item on our to-do list. Let's check our to-do list. Yeah, all right. New routes for register and logging out. So we're going to set up templates. We're only actually going to set up a template for the register. We'll do logging out as well. Let's go ahead and set those up. So I'll come down here, somewhere down here, I like to try and keep all my handlers together as well. So you notice I skipped past some of this stuff and trying to keep all my handlers in one section. So I'll go ahead and set up a new handler called register. Oops. And so this feels a lot like the user signup stuff that we asked you to do. It's not exactly the same, but it's going to feel very similar to what you did with user signup. We're going to have this one handler do both get and post requests. And because I expect most of you to have done most, if not all, of user signup, I'm probably not going to. I'm not going to go through this in extreme detail because I expect this to be somewhat review. But if I'm going too fast or I lose you, please don't hesitate to shout at me, and I'll back up for a second. Go ahead and create our function here for registration. Now I've got 2 methods, get and post. Which one What am I using those two for? What's the difference between the get and the post requests for this particular process?
Post is if you already tried.
Post is if they filled out the stuff and they sent it to me. Get is for if they're just showing up for the first time. So a get request, if I see a get request, it should just be a blank form. If I see a post request, then I should try and get information out of the form and do stuff with it. Make a user and, you know, add it to the database. So we can do the post request first. It doesn't really matter which one you want to do first. We'll do the post request. Oops, double equals there. Post request first. So if we have a post request, they send us a bunch of information. We have to pull stuff out of the form, but wait, we haven't actually created the form yet. We haven't actually made a form yet. So at this point, you might want to stop and be like, well, let's go make our form first so that we know how to pull stuff out of it. I think that's probably a pretty good idea. We can go back and create a new template. So in our templates, oops, come on now. We'll create a new one. We'll call it register.html. Seems reasonable. Base HTML, register HTML, here we go. So let's take a look at this one and see what we need to do. We really just need to make a form, right? So there's some, actually, let me pull up another template real quick just to refresh that we have this inheritance. So I'm not gonna type that out. I'm just gonna grab it and copy it in, save me like 10 seconds. And this is where my form will actually go. So I can go ahead and say, you know, register new account, and then drop a form in here with a few text boxes. Where should this action go? Register. We're gonna have the page process its own stuff, just like you did on user sign up. So I'll send it to register. The method should be post, definitely post, especially since we're sending, you know, email, password information. We don't want that to be readily visible. So we'll put in some inputs here. Email label, inputs. Oops, no, that's all right. Type equals text for a text box. Name equals email, because that's what it is. I need one of those for the password, and then we need that verification piece. So I'll just copy the same thing. Password, type text, name equals password. Oh, cool. Thank you. That wouldn't matter, it just makes me look like a slob. This one's more important, right? And then the last one is to verify. Did I not change the name? Oh, yeah, I was just checking to see what name I wanted to use for this one in my notes here, but you're absolutely right, I do need to change this, verify.
For password, does the type password go in the text?
Oh, yes, it does, thank you. Because we don't want people to be looking over our shoulders and password. There we go, thank you. See, you guys know this stuff. You did it with user sign up. It's not your first rodeo with setting up these kinds of forms. So we're basically done with this one. I mean, we could maybe do some other stuff with this if we wanted to, but we're just trying to get something simple up and running here. So I want to spend more time talking about the database side of things, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time dwelling on the form, but are there any questions before I switch back? Yeah. Oh, I do need a button, don't I? Whoops, thank you, that's important. I'm trying to go too fast, skipping valuable things.
If you don't have a submit button now, can they still, some websites I've been to don't have submit buttons
Mm.
send the information.
Yeah, so if you don't have a physical button displayed on the screen, there is a way that you can read keyboard inputs and do that. I don't think we've seen that in any of the prep work, but it's certainly possible. I don't know how to do it off the top of my head. I'd have to look up the documentation on that one. But yeah, definitely possible to use a keyboard input to send a form instead. I think it's a little bit confusing to some people though. I mean, you usually expect to see that button there, but yeah, it can definitely be done. All right, so let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. Okay, cool. So, I'm going to go back to my Python, and now we can finish up this post request section. I'm going to grab those values out. Email equals request.form email, and then the password, request.form password. I keep hitting the wrong buttons today. Verify equals request.form verify. Okay. And now at this point, we want to do some validation. But honestly, we've done validation before. I'm going to skip it. And if that makes you unhappy, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to, use our time wisely. If you really want to write validation for emails and password checking, then by all means go ahead. In fact, I think in the studio we ask you to do a little bit of that, so you'll get some exposure to that today. But for the sake of time, just to keep things rolling, I'm going to skip the validation piece and move on to sort of the main idea for today, which is I got this information, the user typed this stuff in, and now I want to actually give them an account, right? I want to register the fact that they have an account. How do I do that? What am I doing next? I got the information that they typed into the form. How do I actually make a new user and make sure that that information gets stored in the database? So I need to actually add it in, db.session.add what? What am I adding? The variables? Email? Like this? Don't need to verify. I gotta make a user. I gotta construct a user first. We skipped a step. Yeah? Let's make a user first. New user equals user. Now I pass in the email and the password. And the thing that I want to add to the database session is this new user. That's what we're looking at. Yes. And then to make sure that it's stored, we have to do a commit operation. So we'll go ahead and do that. Yeah, sure. I could take this chunk and stick it directly inside of the add statement. Absolutely. Yeah, question.
Are you counting the for that
So that's a good question. So the emails, should be unique. Is that part of the validation? Is that something that we could validate on the Python side? With some work. What would we have to do? We'd have to go through the database, pull out every single email, and then check them. So could you do it? Yeah, that's actually testing for uniqueness or not is actually something that the database is good at. And I know it seems a little bit counterintuitive to what I was talking about before. Databases shouldn't be used for validation stuff. Well, we have to utilize the strengths of our database. If I'm checking things character by character, database isn't great at that. Python's good at that. For example, if I want to make sure your email has an @ sign in it, Python's great at that. Database, could you do it? Yeah, but that's not really appropriate. Guaranteeing uniqueness, database is good at that. Python, can you do it? Yeah, sure, but it's going to be a little bit more effort on your part to make it happen. So it's not always easy to know where these kinds of things should be happening. It takes a little bit of knowledge of the different platforms that you're using and the strengths and weaknesses of the two. One way you can use to gauge is think about doing it both ways, right? Which way is going to require me to do more stuff, to write more code, to take more steps? Whichever one seems like it's the bigger effort is probably the worst choice to do. Programmers are lazy. We want to write as little code as possible. We want to do as less stuff as possible, the smallest amount of work possible to get the task done. Great question, though. Definitely worth talking about. Okay, so this user account has been created. What do we want to happen after that? Are we done? We want to send them to their page, right? Their brand new account. So how do we do that? That's going to be a redirect. We'll just send them to the main site, right? We'll just send them to the main site. They're logged in now, or are they? Are they actually logged in? No, why not? We haven't started a session yet. And so actually to do that, we need to go up here first and import session. So I just tacked session on to the end here. And now that we've done that, we can go back and actually use this session object. What kind of an object is this session? What does it look like to you? It's a dictionary. It's a dictionary. There was a question asked before if we could have condensed these two lines down, and the answer is absolutely yes. However, if I condense those two lines down, my next question to you is, could I do this? And the answer, I mean, maybe. You could actually just do email here. That would save you, right? If you think you're going to refer, actually it would be new user.email. Anyway, I typed it out wrong. If you think you're going to refer to this object again, you should create it and stash it in a variable, basically. That's why taking shortcuts can sometimes get you into trouble. But anyway, there's multiple ways you can get there. This is just one path. This is what actually keeps us logged in. But now we need to actually check to see if somebody's actually logged in before they can access these pages. That's sort of our next topic, I believe. Let's see. Make sure I'm not... Oh, logging out. We should do that. We did this, actually. We're done with that. Actually, we're not quite done with this. What am I forgetting about my registration? Well, I am forgetting a secret key. We need to do that. I've got two methods here, get and post, but in my method I only did the one. I don't have anything for the get request, but that's a pretty straightforward one. We're just kind of cleaning up a little bit of loose ends here. What do I want to do here if it's a get request? I just want to render the template. Yeah. What did I call it? Register.html. Perfect. Somebody else mentioned a secret key. We absolutely do need a secret key. Kind of going along with our theme today of doing organizational stuff. That's something I would generally expect to see towards the top of the file. The secret keys that you saw in the prep work looks like it was generated by the computer, right? We tried to make it something obscure. We tried to make it something that would be hard for a human being to guess. That's intentional. Try and make it more secure. So one way that I guess you can try to make up a secret key if you really want to. What do we need to say? Session dot secret key, is that what I'm looking for? Where is the secret key? I had one written down that I wanted to use, but I might just have to make one up because I can't find the one that I wrote down. Oh, here it is. App.secret key is what it is. App.secret key. And so, one way of making a secret key, although potentially problematic, is just to mash on your keyboard for a minute. That may not work because secret keys don't usually have special characters in them, like semicolons or slashes. You usually don't see those in secret keys. Typically, you would want the computer to generate a secret key for you that you use, and also you wouldn't want to put it in your code, because then anybody who could see your code would see the secret key, and it's not secret anymore, especially when you think, oh, this is going to end up on GitHub, right? Whoops, I just broadcast my secret key to the entire world now. That's not good. So this is not the safest way of doing things. Right now we're doing it mostly because we have to. We'll show you a better way of organizing this a bit later on when we talk about more security-oriented stuff. But for now, you know, pick whatever secret key you want. In fact, it doesn't really matter. We just need to make it something. So, I don't know, dogs. Not very secret. Not a great key. Don't go to your new job at MasterCard and use a secret key of dogs. Or if you do, don't tell them that I did it. That one's on you. But for now, we'll let it slide. All right. We haven't actually run this and tested it in a little while, so let's do some checking to see where we're at. I know we're not finished yet. We still have some work to do, but let's just test what we wrote. I get nervous when I write a lot of code and I don't test it. So let's just see where we're at, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then we'll proceed on from there. I'm going to quit out of here and start up my application. Oops. All right, so I made a syntax error, it looks like. Oh, yep, thank you. That's right up here. These things happen. Let's try it again. All right, more success this time. So we'll go to our website and see. Now, I'm not logged in right now, right? And it's still letting me do this, which that's a problem. We haven't fixed that yet, so that's something that we're gonna need to fix. But let's go to our register page and see if this works. Whoops, I screwed something up in my template, looks like. Whoops, did I call it something else? What did I do wrong? /register. I didn't save my template. Yeah, that's it, thank you. It was doing exactly what I told it to. It was rendering a blank template. All right, yeah. Refresh the page and there we go, cool. Oh man, it looks ugly, but whatever. So I should be able to type in some stuff. Now it's not doing any validation, right? It's not checking any validation stuff. So, you know, I can type in whatever I want here, and clearly those passwords aren't the same, but it's not going to stop me from doing it. So I'll hit register, and the redirect works. So, you know, if I really want to verify, I should be able to go to my database and see.
I'm having a weird issue.
Yeah.
DG in my entire code is listed not
Have you imported everything properly? I mean, was it working on Monday? Because if it's working on Monday, I don't see why.
I mean, we started with the new studio.
Yeah, I mean, all this stuff's imported up at the top, yeah? If it's telling you red squigglies in here, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. If you try to run it and it's angry at you, that's a bigger problem. So now if we look at the user table, we can see that, hey, I made it in there. Oh crap, you can see my password. But it worked. It worked. It created the user object and inserted it in the database. So we got a couple other things I'd like to get to. I'm actually a little conscious of time here. I feel like we're going to run out of time today. This walkthrough was a lot, actually. But let's do at least one or two more things before we try and get one or two more things marked off our to-do list before we break up for Studio. We don't have a logout thing, but that's not too terribly difficult, right? Let's create a logout route. Next, app.route logout. What method do I need here, or do I need any method here? So what if I don't put a method here, what kind of method do I get? Get, yeah, perfect. So we'll create a logout. Can I just pause for a moment, by the way, and just say how awesome it is that you all answered get right away? Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, that was something we were really struggling with, right? Get versus post, and now you guys are just on it. That's great. I love that. It's awesome. All right, how do we log somebody out? What do we need to do? We gotta end the session. So the session is a dictionary that has our email address in it, so we really just need to get it out. And the way that we remove stuff from a dictionary is to use this delete command, session email. I think we're good to go, right? Now, we would probably want to redirect them back somewhere. Probably want to redirect them back to like a login page, but we don't actually have a login page, and I think that's probably what you're going to do in the studio. That's what you're going to do for the studio today, is create a login page. So for now, we'll just redirect them back to the root. I need a return, don't I? We'll just redirect them back to the main page. And in studio, you'll fix that. You'll create a login page. Yeah, what's up?
Should it be user session?
Oh, yes, you're right. I apologize. That was the wrong key to my dictionary. It has to match whatever I had up here. So I used user up here. If I had used email there, then it would have been fine, but I didn't. I used user. So it should match. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right. We're actually doing pretty well. We just got a couple other things. I at least want to do this one, and then we'll see how we're doing on time, if we have time to do flash messages or not. But let's see if we can at least get these two working. So in our base template, we want to show, if the user's logged in, we want to show their email address that indicates that they're logged in. If they're not logged in, then we want to show links for them to either log in or register for an account on our website. So all of that can actually go in our base template. So let me just find that here. So we're gonna, this is something that I don't think they did a ton of, they did a little bit of this in the prep work today, but we're gonna add some code to our base template to show that particular information. So the question is, how do I check within a template if somebody's logged in or not? That's really what we're getting at, right? So this is a little bit different. I'm gonna come down here, and what I really wanna do right now, right at this particular spot, I wanna ask the question, is the user logged in or not? So we can do that. I can say if, but if what? So I need to get access to the session, right? I need to get access to that session. Or another way of thinking about it is if there is an entry called user in the session. Session is a dictionary, so we're asking it, is there an entry in this dictionary called user? If the user is logged in, then that entry should exist, and we can access it. If it doesn't, then nobody's logged in, and we can do something else.
So it's always necessarily a dictionary of one?
It's not necessarily a dictionary of one. No, it's a dictionary of whatever. We can put whatever we want to in this session dictionary. Any information that will help us do our job on this website, we can stash in this session.
One user, I guess?
I mean, I suppose technically you could put multiple users in the same session, but that is not something, I mean, that's not how people use websites. Could you do it? Yeah, but that's a strange thing to do. If I have multiple users using the same website, right, they each have their own session object. They each have their own session dictionary with their information in it. Yeah, I think that's an important point. So if we find this, we'll just go ahead and substitute this in to our page, like so. And we also want to put a link for them to log out. So we can make it as a link or however you want to do it. Something like that is fine. Just some sort of a link for them to click to log out. If they're not logged in, then we want to present links to the login and the registration pages. So we'll just add in links to take them. Now we don't have a login page, so this link's gonna break because it doesn't exist. You guys are gonna do that for Studio today. But we can still add in the link that you can fill in later.
What does that or do?
It's just the word or, login or register, just the word or showing up on the page. Not the Boolean or.
So you don't have to wrap that in p tags or anything?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, we haven't tested it yet, so maybe I'm wrong about that, and maybe it's going to look hideous. That's certainly a possibility. But it's certainly worth a try. Write a little bit of code, go back and see how it looks. Let's go back to our page and see if I refresh. Oops, I forgot to end the if block. I need to end it here. Thank you. All right. Let's give that a try. All right, so there's my email address. It looks a little, you're right, it looks a little off. I could put a p tag here to move this down a line, but it, you know, the idea is solid. I can click this, it should log me out, and uh-oh, I must have hooked up that incorrectly because it's not working. Yeah, so let's go back and take a look and see. Did I do what now?
Did you save the name?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. No, maybe I didn't. Man. Okay, that did it. I should never doubt you guys. You're always right. It does exactly what we had expected to do, so that's good. Now, this login link is broken because we haven't set anything up for it yet. That's not a surprise. The register link, though, works, so that's good. I'm not going to register for a new account. You can if you would like to, but cool. I'm going to do one last thing, I think, and then we'll probably call it a day. I don't think we'll get to the flash messages today, but let's do this login wall to wrap up the walkthrough today. I want to make sure that actually they can't even see this page if they're not logged in. Right? I don't want them to see this page if they're not logged in. How do I do that? What do I need to make that possible? A decorator, a specific decorator, in fact, before request. So these are my handlers. What we're about to create is not exactly a handler, right? It's not the same thing as a handler, so I'm going to try and keep it kind of separated off from the handlers. I'll put it before my handlers come in. App.before. You can see that it's trying to help me out here. Before request. I want this to happen before anything goes down. We'll create a simple little function called require login. And all it's really going to do is check to make sure that the user's logged in. So I can say something like, if they're not logged in, I'm going to redirect them to the registration page or something like that, right? So if there's not user in session, then we'll redirect them to the registration page. What's the problem with this? They can't get to the register page either. Why not? Register is going to check to see if they're logged in, and they're not logged in. So it's going to send them to the register page, which is going to check to see if they're logged in, and they're not logged in, which is going to send them to the, yeah, it's going to go forever. So how do I fix that? What do I need to say? What?
Allowable.
So we can make a thing with, you know, multiple, there's only actually one page that we currently have that will work, which is the register page. That's it. So if we check the endpoint, and it's equal to register. So if there's no user in the session, or the route is the register page, then wait, is that right? Or, well, here, this will help. I can just put this in parentheses like this. I think that'll do it for me. If the user's not logged in or the route endpoint is not registered. I think this logic's okay. I guess we'll find out in a second when I try it. Not equal?
Instead of double equal, put in
Right here, you think?
equal.
Let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's try it. Refresh this page. Oops, name route is not defined, so I did a oopsie there. What did yeah, it's not route, it's request. That was my fault. Let's try it again. Uh-oh. Oh, no, it worked. It worked. And if I try to go to a different page, does it work? If I try to go to, you know, just the main page, does it work? I just got done saying you guys are always right, and now... This works. This works. Think of it as distributing the knot. That's really what's happening. Distribution. Oh man, algebra class. Oof. If the user is not logged in, or the endpoint is not the register page, then redirect them to the register page. That's what we're saying. Or I guess another way to think about it, right? The user could be not logged in, or this could be, yeah, so we don't have a login page. That's why I didn't include it, because we don't actually have a login page yet. You guys are going to do that in Studio today. That's your task for Studio. So I didn't include that here. But eventually, you'll need to accommodate for that fact.
I mean, regardless of user being in session, if you're not the register page, you're always going to go to the register page.
Well, you should, if you're in the session, you will.
So if the user's logged in, this is true, and this whole thing is true because it's an OR operation. So this would then flip it to be false, and it's not going to redirect me. I'll go wherever I'm trying to go. If I'm trying to access, if I'm logged in, then user is in session. This is a true statement. If I'm logged in, the highlighted text is a true statement. True, or it doesn't matter what the second thing is. True or whatever is true. Not flips it, so that becomes false. So I skip the redirect and I go wherever I was going to go. And you could do the same logic for this one, right? If I'm going to the register page, right, this is true. So doesn't matter what this is at this point because I'm going to the registration page. So this whole thing evaluates to false and it'll skip the redirect. Works for both cases. If you think this is confusing, then that's fine. Rewrite it in a way that's not confusing to you. This is not the only way to write this logic. Rewrite it in a way that makes more sense to you. that's totally fine. What questions do you have? Any questions? Sorry I didn't get to the flash messages today. I am trying to be conscious of your time because you've got your next homework is already in full swing and due. I forget when it's due. Sunday, or Monday, one of those two. So I want to make sure you got time to ask questions about that today and work on the studio as well. So we're gonna go ahead and call it a day here. We're missing quite a few TFs today. I'm sure it has nothing to do with how gorgeous it is outside. They all have perfectly legitimate reasons, and I hope they watch this video later, but we're down like 3 or 4 people. So please be patient with us. We've got all hands on deck. We're gonna try and get you covered as best as we possibly can. So just be a little bit patient. There will be somebody around to help you out, I promise. Let us know if you need anything.